I want to start with a number that almost nobody is talking about because it explains everything about why this hurricane season is more dangerous than the official forecast makes it sound. 190. That is how many Atlantic tropical cyclones have undergone what meteorologists call rapid intensification since 1980. Storms that in the span of just 24 hours jumped their wind speeds by at least 35 miles per hour. Hurricanes that, in less than a day, went from manageable to monstrous. And inside that 190 number is a smaller, more terrifying one. Roughly 1 in 4 of them did it at an even more extreme rate, gaining nearly 60 miles per hour of wind in 24 hours. That is not a slow building threat. That is a storm that does not exist on Monday and is bearing down on a coastline as a major hurricane on Wednesday. And here is the part the season-long forecast does not tell you. Last year, every single hurricane that formed in the Atlantic rapidly intensified. Every one, all 4 of them, all 4 at the most extreme threshold. The official seasonal outlook this year is calling for a below-normal season, fewer storms than average, less overall activity. And that headline is the most dangerous thing about it, because it lulls people into letting their guard down right before the kind of storm that does not care about season totals shows up at their coastline. The next hurricane that forms in this basin is not going to give you weeks of warning. The atmosphere is loaded, the ocean is warm, the conditions for explosive intensification are sitting right there waiting, and the first time the right system finds the right patch of water, it is going to detonate. So today, I want to walk you through exactly why the next hurricane threat is built to explode, who is most likely to be in the path, and what you need to do before the season's first big storm catches half the coast asleep. Let's get into it. I know how this lands. The official forecast says it is going to be below normal. NOAA, Colorado State, the Met Office. Every major team has called for fewer storms this year because of El Niño-driven wind shear that is supposed to tear potential hurricanes apart before they can get organized. So why am I telling you the threat is exploding when the experts are saying it is shrinking? Because below normal does not mean nothing. It means the total count is lower. It says nothing, 0, about how strong any individual storm will be when it does form. And in the modern atmosphere, with the ocean carrying more heat than it used to, and with rapid intensification becoming a defining feature of major hurricanes, a quieter season is not a safer season. It is a season where you get fewer storms, but the ones you get are more likely to be the kind that blow up out of nowhere. Let me explain why, because once you understand rapid intensification, everything else in this video makes more sense, and the headlines about a below-normal season start to feel a lot less reassuring. A hurricane is, at its core, a heat engine. It feeds on warm ocean water. The warmer the water, the more energy is available, the more violent the storm can become. In a slow intensifying hurricane, the storm builds gradually over several days, and forecasters can track that buildup, model it, warn coastal communities with time to prepare. But over the past few decades, the ocean has been carrying more heat, deeper, with warm water extending further beneath the surface than it used to, and that has changed the playbook. When a tropical system today reaches a patch of deep hot water with low wind shear overhead, the heat engine can spool up in a way it almost never used to. Wind speeds climb 35 miles per hour in 24 hours, sometimes 50, sometimes more. Forecasters call it rapid intensification, and from 1980 through last year, it has happened in nearly 200 Atlantic storms, with about a quarter of those hitting the most extreme threshold. Almost a third of all major hurricanes over the past several years have undergone rapid intensification at some point in their life cycle. This is not theoretical. This is the new normal of the basin. And here is what makes this season's setup especially primed for an explosion. The Atlantic is genuinely fighting itself. On one side, you have El Niño building in the Pacific, which historically increases wind shear over the Atlantic, and tears apart, developing storms. That is the suppressive force. On the other side, you have sea surface temperatures still running warm, a strong subtropical high-pressure system known as the Bermuda High that is sometimes called the Azores High when it shifts east, weak trade winds, and unusual patches of warm water sitting in just the right places to fuel a storm, if one finds them. The wind shear is the brake, the warm water is the gas pedal. When you have those two fighting each other, what you tend to get is fewer storms overall. But the ones that do break through and find a window of low shear over hot water intensify like a match thrown into gasoline. That is the underlying mechanism for the about-to-explode headline. The same atmosphere that is supposed to keep the season quiet is the atmosphere that turns the rare storm that beats the shear into something explosive, and the heat dome that is currently sitting over the eastern half of the country, the one driving the historic heat wave, is part of this exact picture. A massive area of high pressure parked over the United States is, by its very nature, the kind of feature that can spin off, cut off low pressure systems on its edges, and some of those features can drift over warm ocean water off the southeast and Gulf Coast and become the starting point for a tropical system. Forecasters have already flagged a broad area of disturbed weather off the southeast coast as a zone to watch. The current chance of development in the next few days is still low, in the single digits, and I want to be honest about that. There is no hurricane bearing down on the United States as I am recording this. But the setup, the deep heat dome, the warm coastal water, the unusual high pressure pattern is exactly the kind of environment that can quietly generate a system without much warning, and if that system finds its window, it can intensify in a hurry. So let me get specific about who needs to be ready, because the regional risk picture this year is different from what most people assume. The Gulf Coast, from Texas through Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and the Florida Panhandle. This is the region with the warmest, deepest nearshore water in the basin right now, and it is the region where rapid intensification just before landfall is statistically most likely. The single most dangerous scenario in modern Atlantic hurricane history is a tropical storm strengthening into a major hurricane in the final 24 to 48 hours before landfall, leaving residents who were preparing for a tropical storm waking up to a Category 3 or 4 heading at their coastline. The Gulf is the place where that scenario plays out most often. The 2026 season has already produced one Gulf landfall, an early season tropical storm that hit the Texas coast and caused over $100 million in damages and 4 deaths in its short life. That was the warm-up, not the season. If you live anywhere along the Gulf, you treat this season the same as any other. The seasonal total does not protect you. The southeast coast, the Carolinas, Georgia, the Florida Atlantic coast. This is the coastline currently sitting closest to the disturbed weather pattern off the southeast and the closest to the western edge of the heat dome's tropical feeding zone. Even a weak tropical depression or tropical storm forming offshore can produce heavy rainfall flooding well inland, dangerous rip currents along beaches, and coastal flooding from prolonged onshore winds and elevated seas. And the geography of this coast has shown again and again that a single tropical system can produce damage hundreds of miles inland. The catastrophic flooding from a recent major hurricane that traveled deep into the Appalachian interior is a lesson that the country is still learning. A hurricane making landfall on the coast does not stop being dangerous at the beach. The interior states that think they are safe. This is the most important region to talk about because it is the region where the lesson of the last few years has been driven home in blood and dollars. Western North Carolina, eastern Tennessee, the Appalachian interior, inland Texas, communities hundreds of miles from any ocean, communities that never thought of themselves as hurricane country, have experienced some of the most devastating tropical impacts in recent memory, with rainfall totals so extreme they reshaped landscapes and caused tens of billions of dollars in damage. The rule has changed. A hurricane that hits the coast can produce its worst impacts 500 miles inland days later on terrain that has no real flood infrastructure because nobody designed the watershed for a tropical system to dump 20 inches of rain on it. If you live in a flood-prone interior corridor anywhere east of the Rockies and south of the Great Lakes, you're in the modern hurricane zone whether your zip code says so or not. Now, I want to take a moment on the most important phrase in hurricane preparedness, because the official seasonal forecasters keep saying it and almost nobody internalizes it. It only takes one. Any seasonal forecast is a probability estimate for the total number of storms across the entire basin. It is not, and has never been, a landfall forecast for your specific town. A season can produce 8 storms total, 6 fewer than average, and still produce one storm that catches a coastline at the wrong moment and causes a generation of damage. The opposite is also true. A season can produce 20 storms, and not one of them makes landfall on the United States. The total is not the threat. The threat is whatever the one storm does that finds the one window aimed at the one piece of coastline you happen to live near. And in an atmosphere primed for rapid intensification, that one storm has more potential to surprise everyone than at any other time in the modern record. So here is your practical action list, because this is the kind of season where the preparation you do today is what determines what kind of day you have when the call comes in, and not the other way around. Build your kit now, not when a storm is in the cone, not when the shelves are stripped. Now, while it is calm, water, at least 1 gallon per person per day for at least 3 to 7 days, non-perishable food, medications with backups, flashlights and batteries, a battery or hand crank radio, cash because card readers go down when the power does, a printed copy of important documents in a waterproof container. The smaller the storm window between formation and landfall, the more important it is that your kit is already packed. Know your evacuation zone before you need it. If you live anywhere along the Gulf or Atlantic coast, you have a hurricane evacuation zone. Find out what yours is now, on a calm day. Know your evacuation route. Know where you're going if you are told to leave. The decision of when and where to evacuate is much harder to make in a hurry, in traffic, while watching a storm rapidly intensify on the radar. Make the plan now so you only have to execute it later. Understand the difference between watches and warnings, and watch the rapid intensification language. A hurricane watch means hurricane conditions are possible within 48 hours. A warning means they are expected within 36 hours. But increasingly, the National Hurricane Center is including language about rapid intensification potential in advisories, and when you see that phrase, you need to internalize it. It means the official forecast itself is telling you the storm could be significantly stronger than its current category by the time it reaches you. That language is the modern equivalent of an air raid siren for a coastal community, and it deserves the same reaction. If you live inland in a region that has been touched by major tropical flooding before, including parts of western North Carolina, eastern Tennessee, the southern Appalachians, and the inland Gulf Coast states, your preparation looks different but is no less important. Know your flood risk. Know your evacuation route to higher ground. Have your important documents and irreplaceable items elevated and protected. Keep your phone alerts on overnight during any tropical event that could push remnants in your direction, because the worst flooding from a former hurricane often arrives at night in heavy rain with very little local warning. And follow the National Hurricane Center directly, not just the headlines. The NHC issues a tropical weather outlook every 6 hours during hurricane season, and the website is publicly accessible. When something starts to develop, the official discussions will tell you long before the cable news graphics will. If you live in a hurricane-prone area, bookmark it now and check it on the same schedule you would check the morning weather. Here is the honest summary of where we stand. The official seasonal forecast calls for a below-normal Atlantic hurricane season this year, driven by El Niño wind shear that is expected to suppress the overall storm count. But the atmosphere underneath that forecast is loaded with the exact ingredients for explosive rapid intensification. Warm ocean water at depth, a persistent and strong subtropical high, weak trade winds, and a heat dome over the United States that is the kind of feature that can spin off the early seeds of tropical systems on its periphery. The season has already produced one Gulf landfall in its opening weeks. The next storm to form, whether it comes this week or next month or in the heart of the season, has every reason to behave the way modern Atlantic hurricanes have been behaving, quietly at first, and then explosively, with a fraction of the warning time the previous generation of storms gave. This is not a season to trust the seasonal total. This is a season to respect the one storm that has not formed yet. So build your kit before the cone shows up. Know your evacuation zone and route now. Understand the rapid intensification language when you hear it. If you live inland in a vulnerable flood corridor, do not assume the coastline absorbs the danger. And follow the National Hurricane Center directly every day all season long. The atmosphere is loaded. The ocean is hot. The next hurricane threat is one warm window away from exploding. I will be tracking every tropical wave and every disturbance closely, and I will bring you the next update the moment the basin makes its move. Until then, stay safe, stay prepared, and never ever let your guard down.